Hi, I'm Katie and welcome back to Rain or Shine Gardening. Today is a little bit of a rainy day. I'm getting sprinkled on here, but I wanted to make sure to try to get a November garden tour recorded just so I can remember back to this time. There have been a lot of changes in my garden in the last month mostly because I've been pulling things out like crazy. So I pulled out all my annuals. I've cut back a lot of things. We've cut out a bunch of trees, and we have a lot to plant still in my holding tank area, kind of my little nursery area of things that I've purchased and I'm waiting to plant. So a lot of things are going to be going in here in the near future. We're also going to be decorating for Christmas, putting up some decorations and Christmas lights and things like that. So I just wanted to make sure to get that kind of video diary of what my garden looked like in November before the end of the month. And I think we're barely making it here. I do still have some pumpkins on my front porch. Yesterday was actually Thanksgiving as of recording this video, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And those are coming out soon because we are going to get decorating for Christmas here soon. So a lot of changes to come. A lot of things, like I said, the annuals are done and kind of taken out of the garden. Things are looking a little bare right now, but I wanted to get some video and photos of what it looks like because come spring, when things start blooming and coming back again, it's just nice to have that comparison of what things look like. It's also nice throughout the year to look back and see what I have for winter interest in my yard, which helps me make smart purchases moving forward and smart planting decisions as well. So let's get started showing you what my November garden looks like, and we'll start here in the front yard. All right, we're gonna start out here in kind of the corner of my yard. So here I'm the closest to my driveway and the front sidewalk. And this bed looks pretty empty right now because this is where I had a lot of annuals planted and a lot of dahlias. So even in my last month garden tour, this area looks completely different. My dahlias were still in and blooming and all of that, but they had since gone downhill and it was time to rip them out. And I did that kind of all in one weekend, one swoop, because we had access to our utility trailer and I just filled it up. I actually filled up 2 loads in my utility trailer and got rid of all of that debris. So it was nice to get it pulled out. Kind of by the end of the season, I'm ready for a change and I'm getting a little burnt out on all the maintenance. So it was nice to get those pulled out, but this bed looks really different. I did get a tree load recently from a local garden center called Paradise Acres, and I recently did a planting video of some of the trees. And one of the trees that I still have to plant is a dappled willow, and I'm really tempted to put it in kind of in this area because I don't have a lot of height here. I do have a lilac tree that's planted here, and it's still hanging on to a few leaves. It's slowly losing leaves. But it will eventually get a lot taller. But right now down in this area, I don't have anything that's very tall for height. So it would definitely bring some different interest to this area. So I'm kind of contemplating whether or not I want to put it here. I do have a boxwood that's really nice to keep some winter interest in this area because I don't have a lot of other kind of deep green like this, this boxwood. I do need to trim it, but I kind of like the wild woolly looking shape to it that it brings to. I don't want something too manicured because that's not my style in my garden either. Definitely not formal. So I kind of like the style that it's in. Moving up the driveway here, I do have a lot of lamb's ear that's growing, and it is also looking a little bit tattered in the winter. It browns out the leaves and kind of looks more worn. But in the springtime, it really comes back to life. So this was a really nice addition because it brings that kind of blue-green color almost and a different texture with those really soft leaves. And then my ginkgo, which is a miniature ginkgo, has lost all of its leaves now, but it turned that beautiful yellow color just a few weeks ago. And the roses are already starting to lose leaves, so they're kind of entering that semi-dormant period, but I'm not going to trim those back and do a lot of maintenance on those until closer to January or February for my zone here in 8B. So that's pretty much what's going on in this bed. Now we'll head up behind me a little bit. So one of the reasons I really like to cut back some of my perennials in the fall is because it gives me an idea of additional winter interest and things that I could plant. So this is a good example in this garden bed. So this is up near the front of my house, my front sidewalk. And I have this archway that kind of goes into the grass yard behind me. But here you'll see I have another rose, and this rose is just starting to lose some of its leaves. It's looking pretty sad, but again, I'm not going to trim that all the way back until closer to January or February either. I do have a fern that's doing pretty well, and this bed in the summertime and starting in the spring, it is really green because it has all of these hostas, and you can see kind of the old sticks that I cut back already, but this is all green in here. You can hardly even see any mulch. So this gives me kind of an idea of, this being a place where I want to plant some evergreens or some winter interest, because I don't have a lot going on here in the winter, but it's one of those areas that we walk past all the time going into the house. And this, you can see I've already cut back. This is a hydrangea standard. So it's a tree form hydrangea, and it is a limelight. And sometimes we wait until later in the winter to cut this back also. But the reason why I cut it back sooner in the fall is because it had really long but pretty small, you can see how big these branches, these stems were, really long stems with really big blooms. And what was happening is every time there would get to be a rain, the blooms got so heavy that it was pulling the branches all the way down. And I was really scared of breakage. So in the winter, if we get any kind of snow or any kind of ice, it's even heavier than the rain because it can build up on there. And so I was scared of damage happening to the tree and breakage happening. So instead of that happening, I decided I'm going to cut this back in the fall. I'm not going to wait until January. Some people like to leave the blooms on for winter interest, but for me, I wanted to avoid that damage, and I cut it back a little bit early in the fall instead. Okay, and then just past my hydrangea standard, I have these couple planters here in the front, and recently I planted up these Shishigashira Japanese maples. These are lion heads, and they are just losing their last leaves here on the very ends of their branches. And I have two of them, so I planted them up here in these pots. And back behind here, you'll notice this is all pretty empty. The only thing in this bed, other than the weeds that are in my compost, are roses. And that's because this is my future rose garden that I'm working on redesigning right now, because I had some things in my holding tank area, my little surplus of things that I purchased from the garden center, and the trees that I wanted to get in the ground. It kind of supplanted the priority of getting my rose garden taken care of. So it is still a project I'm working on. However, I have not had any updates in the recent past of working on that. So that's something that I'm still planning on doing. It just hasn't happened yet. So you'll see, this area, there's quite a few weeds, but there's also just kind of a blank space of compost. And that's because this is the future home of my rose garden. And most likely that will be continued in 2026. It would probably be a good idea to move these roses when they're dormant. So it might be a project if we have a pretty mild winter and our ground's not frozen or anything like that. I could probably work on this some in the winter for a nice spring growth of my roses and kind of a new blooming era in the spring of my new rose garden. So we'll kind of see how that goes. It's still a project I'm working on. I just haven't made a lot of progress in the recent past. Okay, this here is the view from kind of the street front sidewalk area of my garden, looking up, and I have a few new things planted here. It is quite a bit of a difference from my last garden tour. I had Gara that was growing up really big. It was taller than I was, so it was probably 5 to 6 feet tall, but it had started leaning over because we started getting some rain and it was ready to be cut down. And that I cut pretty much all the way to back to the ground. I leave a little bit of a stalk on it, but it comes back every single year really well. So I know that I can cut that back. But here I have a thundercloud flowering plum that I planted this year, but earlier this year. I really wanted some red, so that's a deep red purple leaf color. But the reason I planted it there is because I needed it to create some shade for my Chinese dogwood that I have in the center of this bed. It was getting sun scorch and getting too much sun. So I needed something to kind of make some more shade, but I thought planting a couple other trees in this bed would also look really great. So I have that Chinese dogwood in the middle, and then over here, the closest to me, this little guy here is a Final Fire Japanese maple, and this is from Isley Nursery. And I planted this one just here recently. So I'm excited to see these kind of grow in and work together and help support each other and complement each other here with their different leaf colors and their different structures. I think it's going to bring some really great interest. I do have a small little blue, I can't remember the name of it now, but I planted it the same time I planted my Final Fire. But I have a little evergreen that's planted down here next to my rock, and I might put a couple others in this bed. Because as you can see, once I cut all the annuals back and some of my perennials, there's not a lot of evergreen interest in this bed. So that tells me maybe I need something else down in here. So maybe some of the things that I have in my holding tank area will eventually go into this bed. And then moving over to this side of the front garden, I have my new Moonglow cypress that I just planted, and my new columnar oak tree that I also just planted. And then I have a dwarf blue atlas cedar that just went in as well. So these are all new. This all looks really different because not only did I plant these 3 new trees, but I took out a tree, and you can see the trunk is still there. So that's exactly where it was. And we were able to still dig some holes around it, which was great. I was worried about the roots. But eventually we need to get this trunk taken out. We're just waiting for the right equipment to do that. But this does look very different as far as an update, month-to-month update goes. This area is transforming, and I'm really excited to get some new things planted in here and get some more compost put down as a top dressing. But this bed will look different until these trees grow in, but I'm really excited for this area. This is one of my new garden beds here in my front yard, and it looks a lot different too since I pulled out all of the annuals. I have a Rainier cherry tree here, and I need to do some topping of it this season when we get more into the dormant season as well. And recently I took out a fruit salad tree. So talking about taking out trees, that was one that we did remove. And I talked about the reasons for all of that in a previous video. But here I have a sparkling wine red bud that I put in its place, and it is going to be beautiful. It has a really pretty kind of twirling branching structure here. So I can't wait to see that leaf out in the springtime. I also have some bright colors against the fence here with some lemon cypress and some Italian cypress kind of alternating. So bringing in that pattern and that repetition for my cottage style garden. I do have some lavender that I planted along this pathway. I've got some various daisies and other verbena and things in this garden bed, but it feels good to get things kind of cut back so I can see more of what I want to plant for winter interest. And then I can start visualizing what I want to plant in the springtime already too. So starting to think about those next year annuals and kind of color patterns and schemes and things like that that I want to go in. I do have some ajuga in this bed, some GMs. I have a Daphne plant as well. I've got a couple other things planted and some other changes I'm going to make. I do have a Shasta daisy that's planted here, but the grass really overtook that Shasta daisy and I'm not going to be able to pull the grass out. So I think what I'm going to do instead is dig that out and then put some cardboard down and put some mulch over top just to kind of suppress the grass. Because once that starts spreading and gets too far into the bed, it's going to be a real kind of bear to try to fight with and get to remove. So let's go take a look now in kind of my side yard of my front garden. Okay, this is the side yard. This is my snowball tree. So in the spring, it gets really pretty puffy round ball blooms that are white on them. Such a beautiful tree when it's blooming. It has great leaf structure and it brings a nice little canopy to this area too. This is a new bed that I expanded under this snowball tree just this spring. And so I've got some lamb's ear, I've got a peony and just various other things, some lavender, I have a hydrangea and then a rose and just some random things too. So the annuals really exploded in this bed and kind of took over some of the perennials. So I'm hoping that some of these will come back that got a little bit taken over. But we'll kind of see how that goes this next year. Gardening is always a bit of trial and error, knowing where to plant things. This side of the bed looks kind of messy. And this is going to be a future project too that I need to get to. But this is a grape that went extremely wild. Our grape has never grown this much before, but it's planted near the arbor where you go into our backyard. And it grew all the way along the side of the house and it grew out even into this front pathway. So we probably clipped off an additional 6 to 10 feet of length from the grape. So we're gonna cut this all the way back because we don't want it out this far. I did think about maybe building a little trellis arbor type thing that attaches to the house to have it grow over top of, but I'm not sure. That's probably down the road a couple years if we want to do a project like that. But here on the side of the house, this is my only full shade bed that I have, I want to say. Most of the other areas of my yard are at least part shade. So I've got a lot of shade loving things or cold weather loving things, a lot of hellebores. I do have a hydrangea that appreciates the shade in the summertime. I do have this crocosmia. It is a bully. So it spreads by rhizome and it's completely taking over this bed. And I fear that it's choking out my lilac here a little bit because it has branches that are dying off. And I don't think it's the best place. This area gets a little bit of sun around the corner of the house, but I kind of fear that the crocosmia is encroaching on it and kind of not doing it any good here. So I want to dig these out, but what a project to have to dig up every single little rhizome. So it's going to take a little bit of work because we're going to have to probably dig out quite a bit of the soil to get all of the rhizomes out and then move it. But there's a hydrangea under here. There's other plants under this area where the lilac is, and it's just spreading and taking over. If I would have known, I probably would have never planted it here. It's one of those things like people say about mint or other invasive plants. They say, oh, if I would have known, I would have never started it in the first place. But I don't know. Like I said, you learn things. Some things are trial and error, and this happens to be one of those errors. So I will never plant this again, especially in an area that's not in a confined space because it's so hard to get rid of. But it is what it is. It'll just be a future project. Okay, so here I do have my fountain, and I love my fountain, but it's getting rather green from not being cleaned out recently. So I do need to empty it and scrub it out, give it a good clean, and then winterize it. So usually I drain all of the water out, and we have some covers that we put. I don't want this to crack if we were to get a frozen night or get too much ice. So I need to take care of that pretty soon. This area, my apple tree is hanging on to some leaves, which is interesting. I think it's typically one that loses leaves pretty quickly. For some reason, it's holding on this year. But down here along my fence, I also have some new things planted. I have a lemon cypress here next to the fountain, and it's growing really well. So the things I put in this area seem to be probably putting on a foot of growth. I don't know, quite a bit. I've got another blue cypress there in the middle, and then some Russian sage on each side of it there. So I've got my red rose along the fence, and then we're going to be kind of training our grape to go along the fence also. We've got some more roses along the fence line here that we're going to transplant into our rose garden redo project. I've got a hydrangea here that I never trimmed back, but I want to be careful not to trim too much back, because if you do, then you trim off the buds for the flowering buds for next year. So if I do trim this one, I'm only going to trim it back a little bit and trim off the dead heads there. But this hydrangea blooms a really pretty bright blue. So it's from my grandma, and I love when it blooms every year. So I don't have too much to show in my backyard, but I'm going to show you a quick update of a couple places, and then I think we're almost ready to wrap up with our November garden tour. Before we head into the backyard, I have to show you, look at this beautiful hellebore that's blooming already. Usually we don't get these blooms until more into the winter time, but I guess this one decided to bloom a little early. Here's my garden bed next to the back fence in my backyard. You can see I cut back all of my catmint and pulled out all of the annuals. And I have my columnar apple trees here, and they are starting to lose their leaves too, although they are holding on to some of them still. But pretty soon, not too much longer, these will probably not have any leaves on them now that we're getting some pretty cold nights. And I do have my clematis here, and you can see I have quite a few along the fence line, and I'm going to look those up and see what group they are to know how I prune those, because with clematis you have to be careful not to prune them all the way back if they bloom on old wood, or you'll be cutting all the blooms off, and some need to be cut all the way back if they bloom on new wood. So you have to be careful what group they're in. So I'm going to look each one of these up to know. And then here in November, we have our hornbeam tree that's here in the corner of our yard, and it holds on to its leaves through the winter, but they do turn brown. And I think in the last garden tour, I don't know if I showed the backyard at all, but these were definitely golden not that long ago. They're a beautiful golden color towards the end of the season, so that has changed now. But cut back a bunch of our perennials here. We'll probably blow some of the leaves out into the yard and pick those up with the lawnmower if we can get a couple dry days here in our future. Most of my raised vegetable garden has been put to bed for the winter too. You can see everything's been pulled out of these beds. I did a video where I showed planting up my garlic, where I'm doing a little experiment planting some grocery store garlic this year to see how it grows. All my berries are starting to lose their leaves. My raspberries I'm going to chop down, cut all the way back this year. Last year I didn't do that, and they got pretty wild, and I need to kind of rejuvenate them and get them cut back. And then my blackberries, I am going to kind of organize those and get those tied up so that they will do well this next year. I planted those just this last year, so they got a little bit established growing in this year. They will get berries on the second year of the new canes. So these are first year canes that grew this year. They will get berries next year. And I need to just tie them up and organize them so we can walk in this pathway. So you can see down the pathway, all the beds behind me are cleared out, and most of them will stay that way until we're ready to plant them up in the spring. You know it's been rainy when you have to come out and empty your rain gauge multiple times in the week. So I just got this little butterfly rain gauge for my birthday, and it's been filling up pretty quickly here in the Pacific Northwest. We get a lot of rain, which makes everything wonderful and luscious and green, but it also is very wet and muddy sometimes because of that too. So we garden here in Zone 8B in the Portland area year-round. But sometimes it's just a little soggy, and that's okay. But I think I'm going to leave you here with my back archway. I've got this beautiful honeysuckle growing. It kind of loses some leaves and waves, but it's been a really nice addition. I love kind of having this magical portal up into my vegetable raised bed garden. I did put some little ornamental cabbages in these planters, but under those I planted a few layers of bulbs. So a couple planters that I got planted up back here in the last month, but I'm excited to see those bloom and have some tulips and daffodils and hyacinth come up. These two garden beds here are some that I hope to plant some tulips in as well. So I have some tulips from the Wooden Shoe Tulip Farm in Woodburn that I need to get in the ground, and I saved those for these two beds here in the back. I think that'll be really pretty. I don't have any, I might have just a couple bulbs that are coming up from probably like 4 or 5 years ago that I planted back here. So it's time to add some new bulbs in and get some really pretty spring blooms back in this garden. So that is what I have for my November garden tour. You can see I have a lot of things pulled out. Things are starting to lose leaves here in November. We're starting to get more cool temperatures at night. Starting to get that rain that's pretty consistent. My vegetable garden bed is pretty empty at this point. So looking forward to months in the future where that will start changing and things will start growing again. But in the meantime, these next couple months, I know that might be some opportunity to put in some additional evergreen or conifer interest in my garden. But it's also nice to enjoy some of the downtime and some of the rain that makes things so green and beautiful too. So rain or shine, I will see you next time.